Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, had always been known for her unyielding stance on law and order, as well as for her sharp legal mind. But on this particular day, she found herself standing in a courtroom, facing a judge who had more than just legal expertise on his mind. The case had started as a routine legal dispute involving public safety regulations. But as Pam entered the courtroom, the judge's eyes were drawn not to the facts at hand but to the cross pendant hanging from her neck. It was a subtle piece of jewelry, something Pam had worn for years, a symbol of her faith that was important to her. But to Judge William Caldwell, it was a blatant violation of the courtroom's secular neutrality policy, a rule that strictly prohibited any religious symbols within the confines of the court. Judge Caldwell's brow furrowed as he scanned Pam's outfit. It wasn't the kind of case he was accustomed to. This wasn't about the merits of the lawsuit or the intricacies of Florida law, it was about something much more personal, something that struck at the heart of the separation of church and state. The courtroom fell silent as he cleared his throat. "You're in violation of the court's dress code," Judge Caldwell announced, his voice steady but laced with a sense of authority. "Remove that cross, or I will have to penalize you." Pam Bondi, ever the composed professional, glanced down at the small gold cross around her neck. She had heard about courtroom biases, but she never imagined her faith would become an issue. Yet, she had spent her entire career facing tough battles, and this, while unexpected, wasn't going to be her last. Without hesitation, Pam looked up at the judge and spoke with quiet defiance. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this cross is part of who I am. I will not remove it." Judge Caldwell, taken aback by her unwavering response, raised an eyebrow. "Then I'll have to find you in contempt of court." As the words contempt of court echoed in the chamber, the air in the room grew tense. Pam remained calm, her gaze unwavering, even though she could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She had been in tough spots before, but this was a new kind of challenge, a direct confrontation between personal belief and legal authority. The judge's gavel struck the desk with a resounding thud. "Court will be in recess," he declared, signaling for everyone to step out while he deliberated. Pam stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She had to think fast. She wasn't about to let a courtroom judgment dictate her identity, but she also knew she had to navigate this carefully. The law was one thing, but perception was another. As the recess began, Pam stepped out into the hallway, her mind working like a well-oiled machine. She quickly reached for her phone and dialed a familiar number, her trusted colleague and mentor, Martin Bishop, a seasoned litigator with a reputation for handling the most difficult cases with precision. "Martin, I need your help," she said urgently when he picked up. "I'm in a situation with Judge Caldwell, and it's going to get ugly if we don't handle it right." Martin's voice was calm on the other end. "What happened?" Pam briefed him on the situation, how the judge had objected to the cross around her neck and threatened contempt charges. But it wasn't just the personal affront she was concerned with, it was the potential legal ramifications of allowing the court to enforce such a ruling. "All right," Martin said after a moment's pause, "you've got a constitutional issue on your hands. This isn't just about a piece of jewelry. We're talking about freedom of expression and religious rights." Pam nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I know. I need a strategy, and I need it fast." Martin continued, "You're going to need to file a motion. A formal one. Argue that the judge's directive violates your First Amendment rights. If he tries to punish you for this, it's a violation of federal law. He's overstepping his boundaries." Pam clenched her fist, determination rising in her chest. "I'm not backing down." "Good. You'll file the motion, and we'll push it to the media. This isn't just a courtroom drama, Pam, it's a national story waiting to unfold." Pam didn't need any more convincing. She hung up the phone, filled with renewed clarity. This was more than just a legal challenge, this was an opportunity to fight for something greater than herself. The next morning, as the case resumed, the courtroom buzzed with a mixture of anticipation and tension. News outlets had caught wind of the controversy, and reporters were lined up along the back of the room, waiting for the next twist in the story. Pam had already filed her motion, and the legal community was abuzz with speculation over what would happen next. Pam entered the courtroom, the familiar weight of her cross around her neck, but now it felt different, more like a shield than an accessory. She had received messages of support from several prominent legal figures, including civil rights groups who saw this case as a defining moment in the ongoing struggle to balance religious freedom with the state's role in public spaces. Judge Caldwell was already seated, his expression stern as he scanned the papers before him. When Pam entered, he didn't say a word, but his gaze lingered on her necklace for a moment longer than necessary. The tension in the room was palpable as he raised his gavel to begin. "I've reviewed the motion filed by Ms. Bondi," Judge Caldwell began, his voice authoritative. "While I understand her position, I stand by my initial ruling. The court's neutrality must be maintained." Pam stood up, her voice unwavering. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this isn't about neutrality. This is about my right to express my religious beliefs, which are guaranteed under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. No law, no policy, and no court ruling can take that away from me." The room fell silent. It wasn't just a battle of words, it was a battle of principles. Pam continued, her voice now echoing through the chamber, "By attempting to penalize me for wearing a cross, you're not just restricting my personal rights, you're setting a dangerous precedent that could impact every American's freedom to express their faith or beliefs freely. If this court can penalize me for wearing a symbol of my religion, what's next? Will you dictate what other people can wear, say, or believe?" Judge Caldwell shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but his professional demeanor remained intact. "I'm not questioning your right to hold personal beliefs, Ms. Bondi. But the court cannot appear to endorse any particular religion." Pam's lips curled into a slight smile as she prepared her rebuttal. "But that's exactly the point, Your Honor. The court is not endorsing anything by allowing me to wear a cross. It is simply recognizing that my right to express myself is fundamental to our system of laws. And if the court penalizes me for this, it not only undermines my constitutional rights, but it also sets a precedent for the suppression of personal expression in other areas." Judge Caldwell opened his mouth to respond, but paused as he looked at the motion Pam had filed. He scanned the legal citations, the case law, and the constitutional precedents that had been carefully outlined. As he read, something shifted in him. It wasn't just the well-reasoned legal argument Pam had presented, it was the realization that she was right. He looked up at Pam, a brief moment of hesitation in his eyes. "Ms. Bondi," he said slowly, "I have to admit, your legal reasoning is impressive." Pam nodded, but she wasn't about to let her guard down. "It's not about impressing you, Your Honor. It's about ensuring that the law upholds the freedoms it was designed to protect." The judge sat back in his chair, clearly caught off guard by her determination and legal prowess. For a moment, the courtroom was eerily quiet, the weight of the situation hanging in the air. Finally, Judge Caldwell exhaled, breaking the silence. "I've reconsidered the penalty. The motion will be granted. Your right to express your religious beliefs, including wearing the cross, is protected under the Constitution. I will not penalize you for it." The room erupted in murmurs as the news spread like wildfire. Pam had won, not just the case, but the moral victory of proving that one's faith and legal expertise were not mutually exclusive. As she walked out of the courtroom, her cross shining against the backdrop of the legal system, Pam couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. She had not only defended her right to practice her religion, but she had also shown the world that her legal genius could cut through even the most stubborn judicial resistance. The courtroom victory for Pam Bondi quickly became the talk of the legal world. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, Pam found herself not just a participant in a legal battle, but a symbol of the ongoing debate about the intersection of religion, law, and personal freedoms. That evening, as she sat at her desk reviewing case files, her phone buzzed with notifications from across the nation, some congratulatory, others critical. She scrolled through the messages, pausing on one from an old colleague, Emily, a civil liberties lawyer. "You've done more than just win a case. You've sparked a national conversation. But you know this isn't over, right?" Pam knew Emily was right. As much as the ruling had been a win for her, it had also opened a door to more scrutiny, more public debate. The case would likely be appealed, and there were already whispers in the legal community about its potential to go to the Supreme Court. Pam didn't mind. She had fought hard for her beliefs, and if this case was to become a precedent, she was ready to see it through. She had no illusions about the opposition she might face in the future. She knew all too well that battles like this weren't won overnight. But that didn't matter. The law was on her side, and she had a responsibility to defend the principles it was built on. The next day, as she made her way to a press conference to address the ruling, the room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in her face. The questions were rapid fire, some of them pointed, others more sympathetic. Ms. Bondi, do you think this ruling will influence how other courts handle similar cases in the future? Do you feel that your faith was unfairly challenged in this case? Given the political implications, do you anticipate further backlash from those who oppose your stance on religious expression in public spaces? Pam took a deep breath before answering. This case was never about politics. It's about protecting the rights of every individual to express their beliefs without fear of persecution or punishment. As for the future, I hope that courts across the nation will respect the Constitution as it is written, and that includes our fundamental rights to free speech and religious expression. She paused for a moment, her voice steady but resolute. I'm not here to fight religion against the law. I'm here to show that they can coexist, because the law was made to protect everyone, regardless of their faith. The reporters exchanged glances, and the room seemed to quiet in the face of her words. For a moment, Pam could see the weight of her argument sinking in. This wasn't just a legal win, it was a statement. As she left the press conference, she received a call from Judge Caldwell's office. It wasn't uncommon for judges to contact attorneys after a significant ruling, but this time, it was different. Pam answered, unsure of what to expect. "Ms. Bondi, this is Judge Caldwell. I wanted to personally apologize for the way things unfolded yesterday. I've had time to reflect on the ruling, and I realize now that I let my personal beliefs cloud my judgment. Your motion and your argument were well-founded, and I respect your legal expertise." Pam was momentarily stunned. Apologies in the courtroom were rare, especially coming from someone as established as Judge Caldwell. She didn't expect it, and she certainly didn't seek it, but hearing him admit his mistake made the victory feel even more powerful. "Thank you, Your Honor," she replied, her voice soft but sincere. "I appreciate that. I think we both understand how important it is to protect the integrity of the law." After hanging up, Pam sat in her office, reflecting on the journey that had led her here. From the moment she had walked into that courtroom, she had been prepared for a fight. But she hadn't anticipated how it would evolve into something much larger, something that would resonate far beyond the legal world. This case had the potential to change the way the law viewed the intersection of religious expression and state authority. As Pam looked out the window, she realized that her legal genius wasn't just about outwitting opponents in court. It was about seeing the bigger picture, about understanding when the law needed to adapt to protect individual freedoms, even in the face of societal pressures. The battle may have been won, but the war for personal freedoms was far from over. Weeks passed since the ruling, but the ripple effect of Pam Bondi's legal victory continued to spread. What had initially seemed like a one-off courtroom skirmish had become the catalyst for an ongoing debate across the country. Politicians, activists, and religious leaders from all corners of the spectrum weighed in, either applauding or condemning the decision. Pam, however, was far from distracted by the noise. She had always been a person who focused on the facts, on the principles that made up the bedrock of the law. Her role as an attorney and advocate had always been about more than personal victories, it was about preserving the rights of individuals and ensuring that the rule of law stood above partisan squabbles. Despite the media frenzy and the public scrutiny, Pam kept her head down, quietly preparing for the next step. She had anticipated that the case would likely be appealed. She had anticipated that her stance would invite strong opposition. But she was ready. The phone rang again, this time with a more somber tone. It was Martin Bishop, her trusted colleague, but his voice carried a different weight than usual. "Pam," he said carefully, "the appeal has been filed. It's going to the appellate court. And judging by the way the political climate has shifted, we may be facing even more pressure than before." Pam's heart sank for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "We knew this wouldn't be over quickly. But we have a solid case. And I'm not backing down." Martin was quiet for a moment, then spoke again, "I know you're not. But you're also going to be under a microscope now. The media will be relentless. The opponents of the ruling are already organizing protests, some of them accusing you of using religion to manipulate the law. You need to be prepared for that." Pam had faced the harsh glare of public opinion before. She knew how to manage the pressure. But this was different. It wasn't just about her reputation now, it was about something much bigger. "I'll handle it," she said with a resolve that surprised even herself. "But I need your help. I want us to start preparing for every eventuality. I don't care how long it takes or how many times we have to fight this. We have to win. Not just for me, but for everyone who believes that the Constitution was designed to protect their rights." Martin was quiet for a moment, then replied, "All right. Let's make sure we're ready. But Pam, be careful. There's something bigger at play here, and the forces aligned against us are far more powerful than we anticipated." Pam's grip on the phone tightened. She knew the stakes were higher now, and she couldn't afford to let the pressure derail her focus. In the days that followed, Pam's legal team worked tirelessly, preparing the brief for the appellate court. But it wasn't just the legal strategy that she was concerned with. Pam was keenly aware that she would have to navigate a political minefield. There would be media campaigns, social media attacks, and pressure from both sides of the aisle. Despite this, Pam felt a deep sense of purpose. She had always been an advocate for the underdog, for the people who didn't have a voice. And now, she wasn't just fighting for her own rights, she was fighting for every person who had ever been silenced by political correctness, by overreach, or by fear. It was late one evening when she received a call from an unexpected source, Judge Caldwell. "Pam, I've been following the developments, and I wanted to check in with you," he said, his tone cautious yet sincere. "You were right. What you said in court, it wasn't just about you. It was about the rights of all Americans to freely practice their religion. I think about that a lot now." Pam, slightly taken aback, replied, "Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate that. It means more than you might think." He paused before speaking again. "I want you to know that I've been thinking of ways to publicly support you. If this goes to the Supreme Court, we need more judges who understand the true implications of this issue. I'll be watching closely, and I'll be doing whatever I can to make sure the law stands where it should." Pam was silent for a moment, taken aback by the judge's unexpected words of support. It wasn't every day that someone in his position admitted to a mistake, let alone offered to stand alongside you in a fight like this. "Thank you," she said finally. That kind of support could make all the difference. As she hung up, Pam felt a renewed sense of determination. It was clear that this fight was bigger than just one courtroom. It was about ensuring that individual rights were respected, regardless of who stood in opposition. In the weeks leading up to the appeal, Pam continued her work, balancing the demands of the case with her personal life. But she knew the road ahead would be long. And the outcome uncertain. One thing was clear, this was only the beginning. The months rolled by quickly, each day bringing with it new challenges. The appellate court ruling was fast approaching, and Pam Bondi knew that the case was only going to get more intense. Every decision, every public statement, and every legal maneuver would matter more than ever. She'd already made a name for herself in the courtroom, but this case had turned into something far larger than she had ever imagined. As she sat at her desk one evening, sifting through the mountains of legal documents, a knock at her door interrupted her concentration. She glanced up to see her assistant, Sarah, standing in the doorway. "Ms. Bondi, there's someone here to see you," Sarah said, hesitating for a moment before adding, "He says it's urgent." Pam's brow furrowed in confusion, but she waved for Sarah to let the visitor in. Moments later, a man in a dark suit stepped into the room. His presence was commanding, his face partially obscured by the shadow of his fedora, but Pam immediately recognized him. It was Judge Caldwell. His appearance was a rare one, unexpected, but certainly not unwelcome. "Your Honor," Pam greeted him, standing up. "What brings you here?" "I've been following the case closely, Pam," he said, his voice low and steady. "I think we're approaching a critical juncture in this battle. If this goes all the way to the Supreme Court, the stakes are higher than we think." Pam sat back down, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I know. It's been a roller coaster. But the appellate court's decision will be critical. They're not just looking at the facts anymore. It's bigger than that, there are political, societal, and constitutional implications at play." Judge Caldwell nodded gravely. "I don't think the public fully understands just how dangerous this could become. This case isn't just about you, Pam. It's about setting a legal precedent that could affect every public space and every person's ability to freely express their beliefs." Pam took a deep breath. "That's exactly why I've stayed focused on the law. Because if we allow something like this to slip through, what happens next? Will we let the government dictate what we can believe? What we can wear? It's not just a courtroom matter, it's a matter of freedom." Judge Caldwell shifted in his seat. "I've been thinking a lot about this, and I want to help. Not just as a judge, but as a legal professional who believes in the Constitution. I've already started making calls to some of the more influential legal figures in the country. If you're willing, I want to offer my support publicly. If this case does make it to the Supreme Court, you'll need all the backing you can get. The court will take notice if key figures rally around your stance." Pam was taken aback by his offer. She had always seen Judge Caldwell as a formidable, no-nonsense figure, someone who kept his personal beliefs separate from his judicial role. For him to offer such support was unprecedented, and it made her feel that the tides of justice might be shifting in her favor. "I appreciate that, Your Honor," Pam said sincerely. "I won't back down, but having support like yours could make all the difference. I'm prepared for whatever comes next." He stood up, adjusting his suit. "Just make sure you're ready. The media will be the least of your concerns. If the case goes national, expect every legal argument in the book to be thrown at you. Religious rights. Constitutional interpretation. States' rights. It's going to be a war, Pam. But I know you can handle it." With that, Judge Caldwell turned and left her office, leaving Pam to reflect on his words. She had always prided herself on being strategic, on anticipating every move, but now the weight of what lay ahead was pressing harder than ever before. As the weeks passed, the appeals court delivered its ruling. It was in favor of Pam, upholding the original judgment that her right to wear the cross was protected under the Constitution. But the battle wasn't over. The decision had been a victory for her, but now there was growing pressure from both sides to take the case to the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court. Pam spent the next days preparing for that very possibility. The media frenzy was unlike anything she had experienced before. Interviews, op-eds, and televised debates became part of her daily routine. Her legal team worked tirelessly, gathering support from key legal scholars, constitutional experts, and public figures who shared her belief that the Constitution's guarantee of religious freedom must be defended. One evening, just after a particularly grueling press appearance, Pam sat in her office, staring at the stacks of papers that covered her desk. She had been fighting this battle for so long, and yet, the final decision, whether to take it to the Supreme Court, was still looming ahead. Her phone buzzed with a message from Martin Bishop. "Pam, I've just spoken with a few high-ranking individuals. There's support for you at the highest level, but the opposition is fierce. If this goes to SCOTUS, it'll be a battle for the ages. Be prepared." Pam leaned back in her chair, thinking of all that had led her here, the cross around her neck, the fight for her faith, and the right to stand firm in the face of adversity. She knew what she had to do. "I'm ready," she whispered to herself. "Let them come." The case had finally reached its culmination. It was a cold, brisk morning when Pam Bondi stood outside the Supreme Court building, flanked by her legal team, reporters, and camera crews. The entire nation seemed to be watching. This was no longer just about her, it was about the rights of every individual who sought to express their religious beliefs without fear of reprisal. The legal briefs had been filed, the arguments presented, and now all that was left was the judgment of the highest court in the land. Pam had anticipated the long road to this point, but even she couldn't have prepared for the level of attention the case had garnered. Protests and rallies had taken place in cities across the country, with people both supporting and opposing her stance. Every angle had been explored, every detail scrutinized. It was clear that the ruling, whatever it might be, would reverberate far beyond this courtroom. "Ms. Bondi, are you nervous?" one reporter shouted, pushing forward with a microphone. Pam turned to face the crowd, a calm expression on her face despite the tension in the air. "Nervous? No. This isn't about me. This is about defending the right of every American to express their beliefs freely, without fear of government interference. We've come this far, and I'm confident that the law will stand where it should." Her words were met with murmurs from the crowd, but Pam remained focused, her resolve unshaken. In the midst of it all, she felt a hand on her shoulder, Martin Bishop, her trusted ally, who had stood by her through every step of the legal battle. "They're about to announce the verdict," he said quietly. "This is it. Whatever happens, you've done everything right." Pam gave him a slight nod, then turned her attention to the Supreme Court building as the doors opened and the justices began to emerge. The world seemed to hold its breath. The Chief Justice stepped forward, his voice firm and clear. "The Supreme Court has reached its decision. In the case of Bondi v. the State of Florida, we have ruled in favor of the petitioner. The First Amendment guarantees the right of every individual to express their religious beliefs, and that includes the right to wear religious symbols in public spaces, including courtrooms." A wave of applause erupted from Pam's supporters, but she stood still, processing the words. She had won. Her faith, her legal expertise, and her determination had carried her through to this moment. The ruling was a landmark victory, not just for her, but for religious freedom in America. The Chief Justice continued, "While this ruling does not mean that all religious expressions will be permissible in all public settings, it is clear that the wearing of religious symbols is protected under the First Amendment, so long as it does not disrupt public order or the administration of justice." As the news began to spread, Pam turned to Martin, her voice barely above a whisper. "We did it." Martin smiled, a rare expression of pride. "Yes, you did. This will change things. Not just for you, but for all of us." The cameras flashed, the reporters clamored, and in that moment, Pam felt a sense of closure. The battle had been long and grueling, but the law had triumphed. She had proven that personal beliefs and the law could coexist in harmony, that one's faith did not have to be sacrificed for the sake of neutrality. As Pam walked away from the Supreme Court building, her cross still hanging proudly around her neck, she knew that the fight for religious freedom was far from over. But today, at least, it had been won. Her legal genius, her unwavering belief in the Constitution, and her determination had proven that justice, in its truest form, was worth the fight, no matter the odds. And as the sun set over Washington, D.C., Pam Bondi knew that this was a victory not just for her, but for every American who believed that their right to believe, speak, and wear what they chose was an unalienable part of their freedom.